Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Blackstar, watching the stars through the main screen. His ship had been drifting in empty space for 6 months, hidden from all sensors. The crew of 200 knew they were humanity's last secret weapon, but most days it felt more like they were ghosts. The war was going badly. The Galactic Coalition was losing on every front against the Zephyrian Empire. 3 years of fighting had cost them dozens of worlds and millions of lives. The aliens seemed to know every move before the Coalition made it. Their ships adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal," said Communications Officer Bobby Taylor. His voice was tight with worry. "It's from Haven Prime. The colony is under attack." Morrison looked at the tactical display. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez pulled up the data on her screen. 50,000 civilians, sir. The Zephyrians have them surrounded. Coalition forces are 3 days away. How many enemy ships? Morrison asked. Tactical Officer Ryan Parker studied his instruments. 47 vessels, sir, including 3 of their heavy cruisers. The Colony Defense Force has maybe 6 ships left. Morrison closed his eyes. The Blackstar had been built for one mission: to study the enemy and find their weakness. For months they had watched and learned while staying hidden. They had discovered things about the Zephyrians that could change the war. But revealing themselves now would ruin everything. "Sir," said Navigation Officer Kevin Brooks quietly, "the civilian transports are trying to evacuate. The Zephyrians are hunting them down like animals." Through the main screen, Morrison could see the distant flashes of weapons fire. Each flash meant people were dying. Men, women, children who had never asked to be part of this war. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison said into the ship's communication system. "We have a choice to make. We can maintain our mission and stay hidden while 50,000 people die. Or we can break cover and save them, knowing it might cost us the war. I'm calling for a crew vote." The response came back within minutes. Every department voted the same way. The engine room, the weapons stations, the medical bay, even the kitchen staff. 200 voices speaking as one. "Unanimous, sir," reported Bobby Taylor. "We fight." Morrison felt something cold settle in his chest. He had hoped his crew would make this choice, but he also knew what it meant. "Lisa, bring all systems online. Ryan, prepare weapons. Kevin, plot an intercept course." "Sir," said Dr. Helen Barnes from the science station. "Should we notify Coalition Command?" "No," Morrison said. "They would order us to stand down. We're on our own now." The Blackstar's engines came to life with a deep hum that ran through the ship's hull. For 6 months they had been a ghost. Now they were becoming something else entirely. "Quantum drives at full power," Lisa reported. "All weapons charged and ready." "Stealth systems offline," added Ryan. "Enemy sensors will detect us in 30 seconds. Morrison sat in his command chair and looked at his crew. These people had volunteered for a mission they knew might be suicide. They had families back on Earth who didn't even know where they were. But when innocent people needed help, they didn't hesitate. "Take us in," Morrison ordered. The Blackstar dropped out of stealth behind the Zephyrian fleet. The alien ships were focused on the planet below, their weapons tearing apart the small defense force. They had no idea a predator had just appeared in their midst. "Captain," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the tension. "They're scanning us. Their databases don't have any record of our ship design." "Good," Morrison replied. "Let them wonder." The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their quick adaptation. They could analyze any weapon and develop countermeasures within hours. Their hive mind intelligence allowed them to share information instantly across their entire fleet. It was why they had conquered so many worlds, but they had never encountered anything like the Blackstar. "Sir, lead enemy vessel is hailing us," Bobby reported. On screen, the Zephyrian commander appeared on the main display. Its face was insect-like, with compound eyes that reflected no emotion. When it spoke, the translation came through clearly. "Unknown vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. The Zephyrian Empire claims this system." Morrison stood up slowly. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth starship Blackstar. You have 30 seconds to cease fire on civilian targets and withdraw from the system." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "One primitive vessel against our fleet? You will be added to our collection of conquered species." 29 seconds, Morrison said calmly. "Captain," Lisa called out, I'm reading massive power buildups on all enemy ships. They're preparing to open fire. Morrison looked around his bridge one last time. His crew was ready. They had trained for this moment, but training was different from reality. In a few seconds, they would either save 50,000 lives or die trying. 15 seconds, Morrison announced. The Zephyrian commander's compound eyes seemed to gleam. Your bravery is foolish, human, but we will make your death quick. 10 seconds. On the tactical display, Morrison could see the enemy ships turning toward them. Weapons were charging. The smaller vessels were moving to surround the Blackstar. 5 seconds, Morrison said and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Ryan, show them what happens when humans stop playing by the rules. The first human weapon to fire was something the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the Blackstar launched a spread of kinetic projectiles at incredible speed. They looked like simple metal rods, but they hit with the force of nuclear weapons. 3 Zephyrian ships exploded instantly. Sir, Ryan reported with grim satisfaction, all weapons firing. Target-rich environment. The battle for Haven Prime had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity. They were not just another species trying to survive. When pushed to the edge, when innocent lives were at stake, they became something far more dangerous. They became killers who would do anything to protect their own. The Battle of Haven Prime lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Zephyrian fleet was gone and 50,000 civilians were safe. But Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen knew the real fight was just beginning. She stood at the weapons console reviewing the battle data. The Blackstar had destroyed 47 enemy ships without taking a single hit. The crew was celebrating, but Amy felt only cold satisfaction. They had revealed humanity's true nature to the galaxy, and there would be consequences. Captain, said Dr. Helen Barnes from the science station, I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications during the battle. You need to see this. Morrison walked over to her console. The doctor's face was pale as she played back the intercepted signals. The translation software converted the alien hive mind chatter into words humans could understand. Terror, Helen said quietly. That's the only word for what they were feeling. In 3 years of war, they've conquered dozens of species, but they've never encountered anything like us. The recordings showed panic spreading through the Zephyrian fleet as the battle progressed. Their hive mind network, which usually gave them a tactical advantage, became a weakness. Every ship felt the fear and confusion of the others. They kept asking the same question, Helen continued. What manner of creatures are these humans? Their analysis computers couldn't classify our weapons or predict our tactics. Amy pulled up her own battle report on the main screen. We used kinetic bombardment, nanite swarms, and psychological warfare. But it wasn't just the weapons that scared them. It was how we used them. During the battle, the Zephyrians had tried their usual tactic of using civilian ships as shields. Most species in the galaxy would hesitate to fire through innocent people, but Morrison had ordered the rescue shuttles to ram straight through the alien, formation while broadcasting emergency, coordinates on all frequencies. The message was clear. Humans would go through anything to save their own people. Sir, said Communications Officer Bobby Taylor, we're getting signals from Coalition Command. Admiral Stone wants to speak with you immediately. Morrison's face went hard. Put her through. Admiral Patricia Stone appeared on the screen, her expression angry. Behind her, Amy could see other coalition leaders from different species. The Alterans looked disgusted while the Kelvani seemed impressed but worried. Captain Morrison, Stone began, you were ordered to maintain radio silence and avoid contact with enemy forces. Your actions have compromised our entire strategy. Our strategy wasn't working, Morrison replied calmly. The coalition has lost every major engagement for 3 years. 50,000 civilians would be dead if we had followed orders. You used weapons that violate galactic warfare conventions, said an Alteran representative. The kinetic bombardment alone could be considered a war crime. Amy felt anger building in her chest. The Alterans were peaceful by nature, which made them valuable allies but terrible warriors. They couldn't understand what was necessary for survival. War crime. Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. The Zephyrians were hunting down civilian evacuation ships. They've sterilized entire colonies. And you're worried about our methods? Captain, Stone interrupted. You will return to Earth immediately for debriefing and court-martial. That's a direct order. Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew had risked everything to save innocent lives, and now their own command structure wanted to punish them for it. Amy saw the moment when the captain made his decision. "Admiral," Morrison said slowly, "our communication system seems to be malfunctioning. I'm afraid we can't hear your orders clearly." Stone's face turned red. "Captain Morrison, if you refuse to return, you will be declared enemy combatants. The Coalition will hunt you down." "Then I guess we're outlaws," Morrison replied and cut the connection. The bridge fell silent. They had just declared independence from their own government. The weight of that decision settled over everyone like a heavy blanket. "Sir," said Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez. "What are our orders?" Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and looked at each of his crew members. "The Zephyrians now know we exist. They're going to adapt their tactics and come after us with everything they have. The Coalition thinks we're criminals. We're on our own, so what do?" asked Navigation Officer Kevin Brooks. "We do what we were built to do," Morrison answered. "We end this war. But we're going to do it our way, not theirs." Amy pulled up long-range sensor data on her console. "Captain, I'm detecting massive fleet movements in Zephyrian space. They're mobilizing everything they have." "How many ships?" Morrison asked. "Preliminary estimate is over 10,000 vessels," Amy reported. "They're not just sending a battle fleet. They're sending their entire military." Dr. Helen Barnes looked up from her communication analysis. "I'm intercepting strategic planning sessions from their high command. They're calling humanity a dangerous deviation that threatens galactic stability. They want complete extermination." The bridge fell silent again. This wasn't about territory or resources anymore. The Zephyrians had decided that humans were too dangerous to exist. "Well," said Tactical Officer Ryan Parker with dark humor, "I guess we made an impression." Morrison nodded slowly. "They want to exterminate us because we're dangerous. That means we need to become more dangerous than they can imagine." "Sir?" Lisa asked. "We're going recruiting," Morrison explained. "There are human military units that the Coalition considers too extreme for regular warfare. Black operations teams, weapons researchers, soldiers who were too ruthless for conventional command. We're going to find them." Amy understood immediately. "We're building our own fleet." "Not just a fleet," Morrison corrected. "We're building something the galaxy has never seen before. A human war machine that operates by one simple rule: whatever it takes to survive. That's going to make us enemies of everyone," Kevin pointed out. Morrison's smile was cold and sharp. "Good, let them fear us. Fear is the only thing that will make them leave us alone." As the Blackstar changed course toward the outer colonies, Amy began planning their recruitment strategy. They would need soldiers who understood that sometimes survival required abandoning the moral high ground. They would need scientists who could develop weapons that civilized species wouldn't dare to use. They would need people who understood that when facing extinction, there were no rules except victory. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. 3 months after the Battle of Haven Prime, the USS Blackstar was no longer alone. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of a secret base carved into an asteroid, watching his new fleet take shape. 37 ships now bore the Blackstar insignia, and more were arriving every day. These weren't Coalition vessels with their bright colors and diplomatic markings. These were warships painted matte black, bristling with weapons that had never appeared in any official manual. They were crewed by people the regular military had rejected or discharged for being too extreme. Sergeant Danny White walked into the command center, his face grim. He had been leading recruitment missions to military prisons and black operations units. The men and women he brought back were soldiers who understood that war wasn't about honor or glory. It was about making the enemy stop fighting. "Report," Morrison said. "We've got another 100 volunteers from the Titan Penal Colony," Danny reported. "Former special forces who were court-martialed for excessive violence during border conflicts." "They're exactly what we need," Morrison nodded. The Coalition military had rules about proportional response and protecting enemy civilians. Those rules made sense when fighting civilized opponents. But the Zephyrians weren't civilized. They were conquerors who viewed other species as resources to be harvested. "What about the scientists?" Morrison asked. Intelligence Officer Maria Santos looked up from her console. "Dr. Carter Williams and his team arrived yesterday. They're the weapons researchers who developed the viral nanites before the Coalition banned their work. They're setting up a laboratory in Section 7. "Viral nanites?" Danny asked. "Microscopic machines that can reprogram matter at the molecular level?" Maria explained. The Coalition considered them too dangerous because they could theoretically consume an entire planet if they malfunction. And now? Morrison asked. Maria's smile was cold. Dr. Williams says he can make them target-specific. They'll only consume Zephyrian technology and biological matter. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. His fleet was becoming something that would horrify the civilized galaxy. But the alternative was human extinction. Navigation Officer Kevin Brooks called out from his station. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting movement in the Kepler sector. Coalition forces are under attack. The main display showed tactical data from the battle. 12 Coalition ships were fighting desperately against a Zephyrian assault fleet. They were outnumbered 5-1 and falling back toward a civilian space station. It's the Meridian Station, Kevin reported. 2 million people, mostly refugees from conquered worlds. Morrison looked at his tactical display. The closest human fleet was 4 hours away. By then, the station would be nothing but debris. Sir, said Commander Steve Torres, the former Black Ops specialist who had become Morrison's second-in-command, this could be a trap. The Zephyrians might be using the station as bait. Morrison considered this. The aliens had been studying human behavior since Haven Prime. They knew humans would risk everything to protect civilians. It would be logical to use that against them. You're probably right, Morrison agreed. But we're going anyway, sir? Steve asked. Because that's what makes us human, Morrison explained. Even when we become monsters, we protect our own. The Black Fleet moved out within the hour. 15 ships against 60 Zephyrian vessels. On paper, it should have been suicide. But the human ships weren't fighting by conventional rules anymore. As they approached the battle zone, Morrison gave his orders. Steve, take your stealth ships and get behind their formation. Target their command vessels first. Amy, prepare the planet crackers for close-range bombardment. Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen looked up from her weapons console. Sir, using planet crackers in a civilian area could cause massive collateral damage. The civilians are on the station, Morrison replied coldly. Everything else is fair game. The battle began when the Zephyrians detected the human fleet. Their tactical computers immediately began analyzing the new ships, looking for weaknesses and developing countermeasures. It was their standard response to any threat. But the humans had learned from their own encounters with the aliens. Instead of using the same weapons twice, each ship carried completely different armaments. The lead vessel fired streams of antimatter that tore through Zephyrian shields. The second ship launched clouds of hunter-killer drones that burrowed into enemy hulls. The third used gravitational weapons that crushed ships like tin cans. Dr. Helen Barnes monitored Zephyrian communications from her position on the Blackstar. They're panicking again, she reported. Their hive mind can't process the variety of threats. Each ship is experiencing different types of damage, and they can't adapt fast enough. Morrison watched as Steve's stealth ships appeared behind the enemy formation. They didn't bother with conventional weapons. Instead, they fired boarding pods filled with combat marines who had volunteered for suicide missions. The pods tore through Zephyrian hulls and released their cargo. Danny White's specially trained soldiers fought through alien corridors, not trying to capture the ships but to destroy them from within. They carried explosives designed to turn enemy vessels into expanding clouds of debris. Sir, Amy reported, enemy fleet is breaking formation. They're trying to retreat. Don't let them, Morrison ordered. If even one ship escapes, they'll report our capabilities to the main fleet. The battle became a hunt. Human ships chased down fleeing Zephyrians like wolves pursuing prey. There was no mercy, no quarter given. When a damaged alien vessel tried to surrender, the humans ignored the signal and destroyed it anyway. Captain, said Bobby Taylor from Communications, Meridian Station is hailing us. They want to thank us for the rescue. Morrison looked at the tactical display. 60 Zephyrian ships destroyed, 2 million civilians saved. But he felt no satisfaction, only cold calculation. Tell them we were never here, Morrison said. No records, no reports, no official contact. Sir? Bobby asked. Because what we just did would terrify them as much as it terrified the Zephyrians, Morrison explained. We've become something that civilized species can't understand. As the Black Fleet regrouped, Morrison reviewed the battle data. They had won through superior tactics and ruthless execution. But more importantly, they had sent a message to every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Humans were no longer just another species trying to survive. They had become apex predators who would do anything necessary to protect their territory and their people. They would cross any line, break any rule, become any kind of monster required for victory. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez approached him with a worried expression. "Captain, I've been analyzing our weapon usage. If we keep escalating like this, we're going to develop technologies that could threaten entire star systems." Morrison nodded slowly.
"I know, but the alternative is extinction."
"We'll deal with the consequences after we survive." As the Black Fleet disappeared back into the void, Morrison knew they had crossed another line. They were no longer soldiers fighting for their government. They weren't even rebels fighting for freedom. They had become something new entirely, something that would either save humanity or destroy everything they had once stood for. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans stopped pretending to be civilized and embraced their true nature as the most dangerous species in known space. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet entered human space like a plague of locusts, 5,000 warships, each one carrying thousands of warriors bred for conquest. Their commander, Supreme War Leader Zefak, had studied every human battle for months. This time there would be no surprises. Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien armada approach from his command center deep inside an asteroid field. His Black Fleet had grown to 80 ships, each one more deadly than anything the regular military had ever imagined. But they were still outnumbered 60-1. "Sir," said Intelligence Officer Maria Santos, "our deep space sensors show they're not just bringing warships. They have planet crackers, bioweapons, and something our computers can't identify." Commander Steve Torres studied the tactical data at his console. The unknown vessels are massive. Each one is the size of a small moon. If I had to guess, I'd say they're designed to sterilize entire star systems. Morrison felt cold understanding settle in his chest. The Zephyrians hadn't come to conquer human space. They had come to erase it completely. Every human world, every space station, every ship would be reduced to cosmic dust. "Have they detected us?" Morrison asked. Navigation Officer Kevin Brooks shook his head. "We're hidden in the asteroid field's magnetic interference. They have no idea we're here." For 6 months, Steve's teams had been preparing human space for this moment. Every colony had been evacuated, but the infrastructure remained. To the Zephyrians, it would look like humans had abandoned their territory in panic. They would never suspect what was really waiting for them. Chief Medical Officer Catherine Hughes to the command center, Morrison announced over the intercom. Catherine arrived within minutes, carrying a data pad that contained information the galaxy's civilized species would consider unspeakable. She had spent months developing psychological warfare techniques specifically designed for hive-mind creatures. "Report," Morrison said. "The weapon is ready," Catherine said quietly. "We've analyzed captured Zephyrian communication nodes and identified the frequency patterns their collective consciousness uses. We can broadcast directly into their hive-mind network." "What will it do?" asked Dr. Helen Barnes. Catherine's expression was troubled. "It will introduce concepts that their species has never encountered. Fear of individual death, existential dread, the horror of being alone. For a hive mind, these ideas are like a virus that spreads through their entire network." Morrison nodded. "How long until the fleet reaches the first human system?" 6 hours, Kevin reported. "They're heading for the New Angeles colony." "Perfect," Morrison said with a cold smile. "Steve, are the presents ready?" Steve's grin was predatory. "Oh yes, sir. New Angeles is going to give them quite a welcome." The Zephyrian fleet approached the abandoned colony with confidence. Their sensors detected no military presence, no defensive installations, no sign of resistance. The humans had fled like cowards, leaving their world defenseless. Supreme War Leader Zefak ordered his ships into bombardment formation. They would destroy the planet's infrastructure first, then use their bioweapons to sterilize the surface. It would be a message to any surviving humans. Resistance was futile. The first Zephyrian missiles struck the planet's surface at precisely noon local time. The explosions were massive, visible from orbit. But instead of destroying cities and factories, they triggered something else entirely. New Angeles exploded. Not just the colony, but the entire planet. Steve's engineering teams had spent months converting the world's core into an antimatter bomb. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away and sent a shockwave that destroyed 200 Zephyrian ships instantly. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Ryan Parker from his position on the Blackstar, "the enemy fleet is in complete disarray. They've never seen anything like this." Morrison watched the tactical display as chaos spread through the Zephyrian formation. Their hive mind network was flooded with confusion and terror as they tried to process what had just happened. No civilized species would destroy their own world just to kill invaders. Catherine, begin the psychological bombardment, Morrison ordered. Across human space, hidden transmission arrays began broadcasting directly into the Zephyrian communication network. The signals carried concepts that were incomprehensible to a hive mind. The fear of being truly alone, the horror of individual mortality, the crushing weight of personal responsibility. Dr. Helen Barnes monitored the enemy fleet's communications. "It's working," she reported with satisfaction. "Their collective consciousness is experiencing cascade failures. Individual ships are breaking away from the main fleet." Morrison keyed his communicator to address the entire Black Fleet. "All ships, this is Blackstar Actual. Execute Operation Clean Slate." Throughout the star system, hidden weapons came online. Asteroid belts revealed themselves to be camouflaged missile platforms. Seemingly empty space stations activated gravity weapons that could crush starships like insects. Abandoned mining facilities launched swarms of self-replicating hunter-killer drones. But the most devastating surprise was yet to come. Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen activated the viral nanites that Dr. Carter Williams had perfected. Invisible clouds of microscopic machines spread through space, seeking Zephyrian technology. When they made contact, they began their work. Zephyrian shields failed as the nanites consumed their generators. Weapon systems shut down as their control circuits were dissolved at the molecular level. Life support systems failed as the microscopic invaders turned their components into raw materials. "Sir," Amy reported with grim satisfaction, "enemy casualties are approaching 2,000 ships. The nanites are spreading through their formation faster than they can adapt." Supreme War Leader Zefak watched his mighty armada crumble around him. In 3 years of war, the Zephyrians had conquered dozens of species. They had faced brave warriors, clever tacticians, and desperate defenders, but they had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to send a message that would echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Do not threaten humanity's existence, because humans would rather destroy the universe than accept defeat. "Sir," said Communications Officer Bobby Taylor, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian command ship. They want to talk." Morrison looked around his bridge. His crew had become something that would terrify the civilized galaxy. They had developed weapons that could sterilize star systems, tactics that would make hardened warriors weep, and a coldness that came from knowing they would do absolutely anything to survive. "Put them through," Morrison said. Supreme War Leader Zefak appeared on the main screen. The alien's compound eyes reflected genuine terror as he spoke through the translation system. "Human Morrison," Zefak said, his voice shaking. We did not understand. Your species is more dangerous than we calculated." "You wanted to exterminate us because we're dangerous," Morrison replied calmly. "Congratulations. You were right. We withdraw our forces from human space," Zefak stammered. "The Zephyrian Empire will not trouble your species again." Morrison's smile was colder than the space between stars. "Not good enough. You came here to commit genocide. That requires a response that will be remembered for a very long time." He gestured to Amy, who activated the final weapon in their arsenal. A modified star had been prepared in a distant system, its core packed with antimatter and exotic matter. When it detonated, the artificial supernova was visible from halfway across the galaxy. "That," Morrison said to the terrified alien commander, "is what happens to species that threaten human extinction. Withdraw now and never return, because if we see a single Zephyrian ship in human space again, we'll show you what real annihilation looks like." The transmission ended. The Zephyrian fleet began its retreat, leaving behind 3,000 destroyed vessels and the knowledge that humanity had become something beyond their understanding. Morrison looked at his crew and felt a mixture of pride and revulsion. They had saved their species, but at a cost that would haunt them forever. They had become the monsters that protected civilization, and there was no going back. The war ended not with celebration, but with silence. The Zephyrian Empire withdrew to the far edges of their territory and sealed their borders. No ship entered or left their space. They had learned something about humanity that would haunt their collective consciousness for generations. There were beings in the universe who would destroy everything rather than accept defeat, Captain Jake Morrison stood trial 6 months later. In the grand courtroom of Earth Central Command, Admiral Patricia Stone sat as the chief prosecutor, her face filled with disgust as she read the charges. "Captain Morrison," she began, "you and your crew stand accused of war crimes, violations of galactic law insubordination, and crimes against sentient beings. How do you plead?" Morrison looked around the packed courtroom. Representatives from dozens of species had come to watch the trial. The Alterans sat with expressions of horror, while the warrior Kelvani seemed torn between admiration and revulsion. Human civilians filled the gallery, their faces showing everything from anger to gratitude. "Guilty," Morrison said simply. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Admiral Stone looked surprised. She had expected him to defend his actions, to claim necessity or self-defense. "You admit to using weapons of mass destruction against enemy forces?" Stone asked. "Yes." "You admit to developing biological weapons that could threaten entire ecosystems?" "Yes." "You admit to destroying human colonies to use as weapons against the enemy?" Morrison's voice never wavered. "Yes." Stone looked frustrated. "Captain, don't you have anything to say in your defense?" Morrison stood up slowly. The courtroom fell silent as he looked directly at the cameras broadcasting the trial across human space. "Admiral Stone, you asked me to defend actions that saved humanity from extinction, but I won't insult this court by claiming we were heroes. We became something else when we decided that survival was more important than our humanity." He gestured to his crew, who sat in the defendants section. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez, who had built weapons that could crack planets. Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen, who had fired on enemy ships with weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. Dr. Catherine Hughes, who had developed psychological warfare that drove entire species to madness. These people volunteered to become monsters so that human children could grow up safely, Morrison continued. "We crossed every line, broke every rule, abandoned every principle that makes us civilized. And I would do it all again." The Alteran representative stood up, his voice filled with emotion. "Captain Morrison, how can you justify such brutality? Your weapons could have destroyed entire star systems. You showed no mercy, no compassion for enemy forces." Morrison turned to face the alien diplomat. "Ambassador, your species has never faced extinction. You don't know what it's like to watch your children being hunted like animals while the galaxy's civilized governments debate proper warfare etiquette. But surely there were other options," the Alteran insisted. "Were there?" Morrison asked coldly. "The Coalition fought the Zephyrians for 3 years using conventional tactics. How many worlds did we lose? How many species were enslaved or wiped out completely? Your peaceful approach was getting everyone killed." Dr. Helen Barnes stood up from the defendant section. "Your Honor, I spent months monitoring Zephyrian communications during the war. They weren't interested in negotiation or surrender. They had classified humanity as a dangerous deviation that needed to be completely exterminated. Every man, woman, and child marked for death." Intelligence Officer Maria Santos added, "Their battle plans called for the systematic sterilization of every human world. They were going to use bioweapons to turn our planets into barren rocks. There would have been no survivors." Admiral Stone looked uncomfortable. The evidence of Zephyrian intentions had been classified during the war, but it was now part of the public record. The aliens really had planned genocide on an unprecedented scale. "That may be true," Stone said, "but it doesn't justify your methods. You became no better than the enemy you fought." Morrison's expression hardened. "No, Admiral. We became exactly what was necessary to protect our people. The Zephyrians understand only strength and fear. They stopped attacking us not because we negotiated or showed them mercy, but because they learned that humans would rather burn the galaxy down than accept defeat." Communications Officer Bobby Taylor stood up next. "Sir, permission to speak?" "Granted," said the judge. "I monitored communications from across the galaxy during our campaign," Bobby said. "Do you know what happened after news of our victories spread? 12 species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrians launched successful rebellions. They won their freedom because the Empire was too terrified to deploy forces against them. The Kelvani military has adopted human tactical doctrines," added Navigation Officer Kevin Brooks. "Their casualty rates have dropped by 60% in border conflicts. Sometimes being feared saves more lives than being loved." The trial continued for weeks. Expert witnesses testified about the weapons the Black Fleet had used. Military historians compared their tactics to every major conflict in galactic history. Psychologists analyzed the long-term effects of their actions on interstellar relations. But the most damning evidence came from the humans themselves. They didn't try to justify their actions or claim moral superiority. They simply stated the facts. When facing extinction, they had chosen to become monsters, and it had worked. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment for the senior officers and dishonorable discharge for the crew. But there was a secret addendum to the judgment that wasn't announced in open court. Morrison and his senior staff were given new identities and assigned to command exploration vessels on the galactic frontier. Officially, they were disgraced war criminals. Unofficially, they were humanity's insurance policy against unknown threats. Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen, now going by the name Sarah Blake, established the Human Defense Archive in a classified facility on Luna. Every weapon, tactic, and strategy developed during the war was stored there, along with detailed plans for even more terrible innovations that had never been used. The archive's motto, carved above the entrance in simple letters, read, "So that we remember what we're capable of, and pray we never need to be again." Dr. Catherine Hughes, using the name Linda Carter, continued her research into psychological warfare. Her work was classified at the highest levels, known only to a handful of government officials who understood that sometimes the most terrible weapons were also the most necessary. Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez, now called Maria Gonzalez, led a team of scientists who monitored space for potential threats. They developed early warning systems and prepared contingency plans that would never see the light of day unless humanity faced another existential crisis. 5 years after the trial, Morrison received a coded message while commanding what appeared to be a routine survey mission near the galactic rim. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching human space from beyond the known galaxy, something that didn't match any species in their databases. As he reviewed the crew roster of volunteers who had requested transfer to his exploration vessel, Morrison felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. Bobby Taylor, Kevin Brooks, Ryan Parker, and dozens of others from the original Black Fleet. They were all using different names, but their eyes held the same hard determination. The galaxy thought they were reformed criminals serving out their sentences in exile. But Morrison knew better. They were predators who had tasted victory and learned the price of civilization. They had become something that the universe's peaceful species couldn't understand or accept. They had become humanity's final weapon, waiting in the darkness between stars for the day when extinction threatened again. And when that day came, they would do whatever was necessary to ensure human survival. Some called them war criminals. Others called them heroes. They called themselves ready. In the depths of space, far from the civilized worlds and their moral certainties, the Black Fleet continued its eternal patrol. They were the monsters who protected the light, the killers who preserved innocence, the damned who saved the righteous. They were human, in all the terrible glory that word implied.